When my son Brian left me at the airport curb and never came back, I thought that was the lowest he could go. I was wrong. He was just getting started, and by the time I found out he'd forged my signature and listed my house for sale, I wasn't just heartbroken, I was ready to fight. You ever have a moment where the cold isn't from the weather, but from the person standing right in front of you? That was me, that morning outside the terminal. Sky still gray, my suitcase sitting upright beside me like a silent witness. I stood there, dumbfounded, clutching my boarding pass with fingers that had started to tremble. Brian rolled down the window of his SUV, leather seats, of course, always leased, and flashed that same grin he'd used since he was a teenager whenever he wanted something. "Mom," he said, "turns out you left your ID at home. Can't get on the flight without it. Just hang tight. I'll circle back." Then he drove off. And I waited. I waited with that stupid trust still flickering in my chest, the kind only a mother could have after 70-some years of loving someone who never quite gave it back. But he didn't come back. Not in 5 minutes. Not in 15. Not in the 42 minutes I stood by that sliding glass door, heart thudding louder with every passing shuttle. I texted him, twice, got nothing. Then, a third message blinked onto my screen like a slap. "We needed alone time. Hope you understand." That's what he wrote. No, sorry. No apology for dumping his 73-year-old mother at the damn airport curb, with nothing but a carry-on and a promise. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. And for a second I thought, maybe it's a joke. Maybe Lori, his wife, was behind it. She never liked me much. Always spoke to me like I was a kid who couldn't keep up. But no, it was Brian. My only child. My son, who used to draw me crayon portraits and say I was his #1 lady. My Brian, who I co-signed a $200,000 business loan for when his app startup fell apart. My knees buckled a little, but I didn't fall. Not then. Instead, I wheeled my suitcase back through the doors, cutting across the polished linoleum, while people hustled past with beach hats and wheeled duffels. They were going on their vacations. Me? I was figuring out how to get back home after a betrayal I hadn't even begun to process. The cab ride cost $46 and change. The driver didn't speak much, just watched me in the rearview mirror like I might break. When we pulled into my driveway, the house I paid off 32 years ago, where the porch still creaks and the mailbox still leans slightly left, I didn't feel relief. I felt old. And foolish. Trina saw me from her front window. She was in her garden gloves, pulling weeds from around her marigolds. "Elaine?" she called. "Weren't you flying out today?" I didn't answer right away, just gave her a tight smile. "Change of plans," I said. She wiped her hands on her jeans and walked across the lawn, eyes soft with concern. "Want some tea?" That woman could always sense a storm before the thunder hit. Inside her kitchen, over 2 mugs of Earl Grey, I finally told her. Not everything. Not yet. Just enough. That he'd left me. That I'd come home alone. That the whole thing stunk. Trina didn't gasp or get overly dramatic. She just looked at me, like she had when Kyle, my late husband, was in hospice and I couldn't bring myself to face it. Like she knew I needed steadiness, not sympathy. "You want me to stay over tonight?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, but thank you." Later, I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photo of Kyle on the nightstand. That square-jawed man with the dimple and the tired eyes. He was never easy, but he was decent. The kind of man who'd drive all the way back home if you left your gloves on the counter. Never mind your ID. He wouldn't have left me standing in front of Delta's sliding glass doors like some stray. I whispered out loud, "I don't know what happened to him, Kyle. I really don't." That night, I pulled out my old binder. The one with all the loan documents, bank statements, the power of attorney I signed before my gallbladder surgery 5 years ago. I had a strange feeling, one that curled in my gut and refused to let go. You ever feel something's coming? Something you can't name, but you know it won't be kind? I didn't sleep. I just lay there in the dark, listening to the creak of the wind against the shutters, wondering where the line was drawn between sacrifice and stupidity. When I woke the next morning, there was a letter in my mailbox from the bank. It was a delinquency notice for Brian's business loan, the same loan I co-signed against Kyle's advice. The same loan Brian said he was handling just fine. 3 missed payments. If a fourth one hit, I'd be on the hook. They could garnish my Social Security, for God's sake. I sat down at the kitchen table and read it again and again, the words blurring. Then I called him. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I just sat there with the phone pressed to my chest, the old clock ticking behind me like a countdown. I thought about the way he looked when he handed me that vacation brochure 2 months ago. Just you and me, Ma, Florida. You've earned it. Thought about how he'd watched me cry from the surprise of it. My son is either a liar or he's lost. Or both. I poured myself a cup of coffee. Burnt. Over-strong. I didn't care. Because right then, I knew 2 things. 1, Brian wasn't going to stop unless I made him. And 2, I still had a few cards left to play. I hadn't touched that bank envelope again since yesterday morning. But the words on it stuck in my brain like old gum on a shoe. 3 missed payments. Immediate action required. That loan I co-signed for Brian's startup, his big idea to build an AI-powered dog-walking app, was unraveling just like his promise. Back then, he swore it would be the next Uber. I remember him leaning across the kitchen table, eyes wide, breathless with excitement. Ma, you've always believed in me. Just need someone to back me while I get the first version out. It's not even risky. We'll be profitable in 6 months. Kyle had hated the idea. Elaine, you don't risk retirement money on someone who thinks hashtags are business plans. But Kyle was already sick then. I was trying to keep the peace, trying to believe that if I just gave a little more, Brian would rise. I signed the damn papers. And now, he'd left me at the airport like a bag of trash while my name was still tethered to his sinking ship. Well, I wasn't going down with him. I called the bank, told them I wanted to schedule a meeting in person. Then I called Trina. You want me to drive you? She asked, voice already full of worry. Just keep your phone close, I said. Something tells me this rabbit hole goes deeper. And I was right. At the bank, I met with a young man named Joseph. Baby-faced, polite, a little too rehearsed. I explained the letter, the loan, the cosign. He tapped on his keyboard, then tilted the monitor slightly toward me. It appears the borrower, Mr. Brian T. Hollis, hasn't made a payment in over 90 days. And since your name is on the original agreement, he didn't need to finish. I stared at the screen, noticing something odd. What's this other line item? Account ending in 3,421? He blinked. That's one of the joint accounts. I don't have a joint account with Brian. Joseph hesitated. Actually, you do. It was established 3 years ago under power of attorney. My stomach turned. Power of attorney. My surgery. That gallbladder mess. They'd needed me to sign all those forms. Brian said it was just in case. I needed someone to handle bills while I was under anesthesia. Turns out, he'd used that as his golden ticket. I'd like to see a printout of every transaction from that account, I said, voice tight. He left for a moment, and I just sat there, staring down at my own hands, remembering how Brian used to grip my fingers when he was a boy. Don't let go, Mommy, he'd say. Oh, how times had changed. Joseph returned and laid out 3 printed pages. I read every line. Designer stores, Airbnb charges in Las Vegas, crypto buys. Thousands of dollars shuffled from my savings into this account and bled dry again, all while I thought Brian was doing fine. That old familiar ache hit my ribs like a stone. Trust betrayed. Again. Can I revoke that power of attorney? I asked. He nodded. Of course. We'll need your identification and a signature. I slid him my ID and pen without hesitation. And I'd like to freeze this joint account, I added. Immediately. Joseph blinked. Would you like to notify the other party? No, I said. Let him find out the same way I found out he left me at the airport. That evening, back home, I finally pulled out the folder where I kept all my titles, deeds, and savings plans. I might not have much, but what I had built with decades of caution and sweat. and I wasn't letting my son spend one more dime of it. I changed my passwords, called my financial advisor, and asked how to open a private trust, set up alerts on every account with my name on it. It felt like fortifying the castle after the enemy already stole the crown. But it was something. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to see Brian, tan, relaxed, sunglasses still perched in his hair. "Mom," he said, like we were meeting for brunch, "you wouldn't believe the weather down there. Florida's perfect this time of year." I didn't smile. "What are you doing here?" He shrugged. "Lori's having dinner with friends. Thought I'd swing by, check in. You looked a little out of it when I left." "When you left me, you mean?" He had the gall to chuckle. "Come on, Mom. You needed rest anyway. That trip would have worn you out." My anger simmered. But I didn't show it. Not yet. He stepped inside, uninvited, and flopped onto my couch like he owned it. "Oh, and by the way, since you're not going anywhere for a while, I was thinking maybe it's time to revisit that house deed idea." "What house deed idea?" He grinned. "You know, putting the place in my name, just to make things easier down the line. Property taxes, upgrades, maintenance. It'd all be smoother that way." The same grin he used when he was 15 and lied about denting my station wagon. Only now, the stakes were my life's work. "You've been using the power of attorney to drain our accounts," I said quietly. His smile faltered for half a second, then returned. "It's not draining, it's reallocating. I was just managing things." "You didn't manage anything," I snapped. "You robbed me, Brian." He sat up, expression darkening. "I earned that access. I've been taking care of things ever since Dad passed. You owe me some trust." I walked to the cabinet and pulled out a letter. "You want to talk about trust? Here's the letter from the bank about your missed payments. You lied to me, Brian." He waved it off. "That's just temporary. Once I get the new investors, you're not getting a dime more. And the power of attorney is revoked." His eyes narrowed. "You can't do that." "I already did." Silence fell between us like ash. Then he laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You'd leave your own son in a mess like this? You left your mother at the airport curb without even a call." He stood then, jaw clenched. "Unbelievable." "That's right," I said. "Believe it." And as he stormed out, muttering curses under his breath, I just stood at the window, watching him fumble for his car keys like the world had betrayed him. But the truth? He was the one who taught me how to be cold. The following Saturday, Trina insisted I come over for cards, but I said no. My heart wasn't in it. Instead, I sat at my window, watering my African violets and watching the neighborhood kids' chalk drawings on the sidewalk. That's when the music started. The bass from the pop station rattled the still air. I peered outside and saw cars lining Brian's driveway and spilling into the street. One of them had a bumper sticker that read "Boss Babe on Board," and I didn't even need to guess. It was Lori's sister. The Millers were there too, with their shiny watches and expensive loafers, all puffed up like peacocks. A backyard barbecue, by invitation only. And I wasn't invited. Still, I couldn't help it. I walked down the sidewalk slow and casual. Until I was across from the house, I helped them put the down payment on. I stood behind the hedges and listened. The laughter came in waves, but underneath it, I heard something sharp. "His mom still lives alone in that big place?" a man asked. Lori's voice cut through like a steak knife. "Oh, not for long. Brian's sorting it out. We'll be moving in or flipping it once everything's squared away. The bones are good. It just needs some updating." My breath caught in my throat. Another voice chimed in, giggling. "You gonna keep the carpet or go hardwood?" "I'll tear out every last piece of her granny decor," Lori said, raising her wine glass. "Right after she's gone." A round of laughter. Full-bellied. Cruel. Brian didn't correct her. He didn't defend me. He just laughed along, then added, "The place is practically ours already. Mom just hasn't signed the papers yet. But she will." I didn't hear the rest. I turned and walked home with my head high, but my stomach clenched like I'd swallowed glass. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my hands. You reach a certain age, And you think you've heard every insult, survived every kind of disrespect. But nothing prepares you for hearing your son talk about your home, your life, like it's something he can cash in at Home Depot. That night, I opened a fresh page in my notebook. Wrote 3 words at the top. He has plans. Then underneath, so do I. The next day, I drove to the library to print out property records. I had a feeling, a gnawing in my gut like termites under floorboards. When I typed in my address, the database spun for a moment. Then it popped up, still in my name. But then I searched his name. And there it was. A pending MLS listing. My house. Photos of my sunroom. My backyard with the bird bath Kyle installed. Listed under coming soon. Priced for cash buyers. And the listed agent? Lori. The picture of her on the profile had her in a bright red blazer, arms crossed, grinning like a fox. I nearly dropped the mouse. He didn't just talk about it. He was trying to sell it. Under my name. I printed out the page, shoved it in my purse, and drove home on trembling legs. I don't remember half the ride. My head buzzed, my hands cold on the wheel. I'd been robbed. Not with a ski mask and a weapon, but with paperwork and smug entitlement. I called Brian. Straight to voicemail. So I drove. His car was in the driveway. Music blaring again, grill smoking out back. I didn't knock. I opened the front door and walked in like I owned the place. Because once upon a time, I'd helped them keep this house when the bank was circling. Brian was in the kitchen, flipping ribs on a tray. "Mom," he said, startled. "Didn't expect." I tossed the listing on the counter. His face changed. Just a flicker. "You want to tell me why my house is up for sale?" He set down the tongs, feigning calm. "It's just a test listing. Lori was using it to practice her back-end admin." "Don't lie to me again." He paused. "Okay, listen. We just thought, if you're going to move in with us eventually, or need assisted living one day, it'd be better to start preparing. The market's hot right now." I stared at him. That's what he saw me as now. A house to liquidate, and a burden to manage. I never said I was leaving my home. He shrugged, a little too casually. "Eventually you'll have to. Might as well make the most of it." I was quiet for a long moment. Then I picked up the listing, folded it carefully, and tucked it into my purse. "You know what, Brian?" "What?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Start packing." I thought I'd hit my limit, but nothing prepares you for learning your own son tried to sell your house behind your back. The day after I found the listing, I spent the morning scrubbing my kitchen counters. That's what I do when I'm furious. Clean. The sponge was practically shredded by the time Trina stopped by with a cinnamon coffee cake. "You okay?" she asked. I didn't answer at first. Just pointed to the papers spread across my kitchen table. The MLS listing, the bank notice, the power of attorney documents I'd had officially revoked the day before. Trina's face went from warm to stone cold in under a second. She pulled out a chair and sat down slowly. "He listed your house," she said, voice quiet, without asking. "Elaine, that's not just shady. That's fraud." I nodded. "Do you want me to call someone?" she asked. "A lawyer? The police?" "Not yet," I said. "Let me handle this my way." Because deep down, I wasn't looking for justice yet. I was looking for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came sooner than I thought. That afternoon, I was pruning the hydrangeas in my front yard when a woman I didn't recognize slowed her car, rolled down the window, and called out, "Is this the one that's coming on the market soon?" The listing said it'd be ready by next week. I blinked at her. "Excuse me?" She smiled brightly. "The Hollis house. Realtor's named Lori? Said it was a quiet neighborhood, good schools, figured I'd do a drive-by before the open house." I stood there in my gloves and sun hat, the pruning shears still in my hand, and forced a smile. "This house isn't for sale, ma'am, and I'm not going anywhere." Her smile faded. She gave an awkward little wave and drove off. When she turned the corner, I dropped the shears and walked inside. Brian hadn't just thought about it. He was actively trying to sell my home while I was still living in it. That night, I pulled out the black binder again. Inside was everything Kyle and I ever built. Birth certificates, life insurance, even the tiny key to the safety deposit box we kept at State Trust Bank downtown. I hadn't touched that box since Kyle passed, but it held every backup plan we ever made. That next morning, I went straight there. The woman behind the counter took my ID, checked her screen, and nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Hollis, your deposit box is still active. Right this way." She led me to a small room with a heavy steel door, then left me alone. My hands trembled as I turned the key. Inside, deeds, a few old savings bonds, and a letter, sealed in an envelope marked in Kyle's handwriting. "In case of Brian." That stopped me cold. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet. "Elaine, if you're reading this, it means you've got a mess on your hands involving our son. You always had a softer heart than me. I know how hard it's been to watch him grow into someone we barely recognize. But don't let him bankrupt your dignity. You built this life brick by brick. Don't let him cash it in for pennies. Love, Kyle." I sat there for a long time, holding that paper like it was a lifeline. And in a way, it was, because it reminded me that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I was done being walked on. That afternoon, I called the bank and asked for a financial advisor. I told her I wanted to move the rest of my assets, pensions, CDs, everything, into a private irrevocable trust, one Brian couldn't touch, ever. She walked me through the paperwork. I signed with a steady hand. Then I froze every account that had his name tied to it, including the one he'd been using like his personal slush fund. The last thing I did? I had the house title updated, with a special condition added. It could only be transferred upon my death, and only under conditions that excluded Brian Hollis as a beneficiary. That night, I slept like a baby for the first time in months. But the next morning, the storm hit. He called at 9:13 a.m., voice tight. "Hey, Mom," he said, trying to keep it light. "Weird thing. I tried to move some funds from the joint account, and it's frozen." "MMHMM, I said. "Did the bank mess something up?" "No, I did." Silence. "You did?" "I revoked the power of attorney and froze the account. That money's mine, Brian, always was." I could practically hear him blinking. "You can't just, Mom, do you know what you've done? My mortgage bounces next week. Sounds like a you problem." He lost it then. Started shouting about how he'd built this life, how I was ruining everything. Said I was being petty. I waited until he was breathless. Then I said, calm and cool, "You listed my home behind my back. You tried to sell the roof over my head." "I was helping. You're just too stubborn to see the big picture." I laughed, and it startled even me. A sharp, bitter sound. "The big picture? Honey, I painted the picture. You're just scribbling over it with a Sharpie." Click. I hung up. And this time, he was the one left listening to dead air. After freezing the accounts, I thought the worst was over, until I discovered how deep Brian had dug his claws into my life. The house felt too quiet the next morning. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the closet. Half of my good dresses were still in garment bags from the trip that never happened. That Florida vacation, the one Brian promised me as a thank you, a mother-son getaway, felt like something I dreamed up in a lonely moment. Except now the dream had teeth. I spent the morning calling the county office. I needed to be sure about everything. I'd already closed the joint accounts, transferred my funds to a private trust, and placed an iron gate around the deed of the house. But something in my bones told me there was one last stone I hadn't turned. And I was right. The county clerk's voice was apologetic, like she'd had to make this same call to too many elderly folks before. "Ma'am, according to our records, a limited financial power of attorney is still active, one that applies to certain investment holdings and insurance claims. It was filed separately from the one you revoked." My stomach dropped. "Filed by who?" "Brian Hollis. In 2021, 2 years ago, right after my knee surgery, when I was hopped up on pain meds and didn't even remember what day it was half the time." The clerk continued, "I'm not saying it's fraudulent, ma'am, but it happens. You might want to speak with an attorney, or at least review your life insurance and annuity paperwork. There are some concerning transfers on file." I thanked her. hung up and stared at the kitchen tile for a good 20 minutes. He'd found a loophole. Even after I revoked the main power of attorney, there was another. One he tucked away like a spare key under the mat. Probably figured I'd never notice. And I might not have, if I hadn't followed my gut. That afternoon, I drove straight to the insurance office where Kyle and I had our policies for decades. The same firm that handled our annuities, our burial plans, our end-of-life wishes. I knew the receptionist. Her name was Marta. She used to bring lemon bars to the church bake sale every spring. "Marta," I said quietly, "can I speak to someone about my file? Privately?" She saw my face and didn't ask questions. Led me right back to the office of a man named Doug, mid-50s, a little too much cologne, but competent. I told him what I'd learned. He frowned, pulled up the file. There was a change of beneficiary form submitted last summer. My chest tightened. Change to who? He turned the monitor. It wasn't me, or a charity, or even a trust. It was Brian, sole beneficiary on 2 separate policies. One for $80,000, the other for $240,000. And the kicker? One was structured as an accidental death benefit, meaning if I slipped on the stairs or got hit by a car, he'd receive double. I felt sick. "That's not all," Doug said, clicking deeper into the file. "There's a recent payout request. It's pending. But the signatures," he squinted. "Well, frankly, they don't match." I leaned in. And there it was. My name, scrawled like a bad imitation. "You didn't sign this, did you?" he asked. I shook my head. He sat back. "Then we've got a real problem." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just went cold inside. Cold like the day I stood at the curb with my suitcase, wondering why my son hadn't come back. But this wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditation. Doug picked up the phone and called the fraud division. Within minutes, a report was filed. He slid a folder toward me and said gently, "You'll need to change your beneficiaries and freeze the accounts. We'll mark this as potential elder fraud." I signed everything. Then I sat in the car for half an hour, engine off, fingers clutching the steering wheel. My son had tried to sell my home, drain my accounts, and cash in on my death, all behind a smile and a barbecue grill. Well, he forgot who raised him. I was the woman who nursed Kyle through chemo without missing a single bill. The woman who held 2 jobs when Brian was a baby, because the gas company shut off our heat in January. The woman who paid off this house with grit, coupons, and the kind of discipline you don't learn from a self-help book. He thought he could bury me, but I was the damn mountain. He thought he could bleed me dry and walk away smiling, but I'd found his pressure points, and I was about to press. 2 days passed before Brian realized something was seriously wrong. I didn't answer his calls, didn't reply to his texts, just let them pile up, each one more frantic than the last. He went from, "Hey, let's talk," to "What the hell are you doing?" in under 12 hours. By the 3rd day, I heard the knock on my front door. Not the polite kind either. The kind that rattles glass. I didn't answer. I stood in the hallway and watched him through the peephole, pacing, cursing, tapping away at his phone. Lori was in the car, arms crossed, dark sunglasses hiding whatever emotion she still had left for me. Finally, he pulled out his phone and made a call. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. "Yeah, it's Brian Hollis. I'm trying to make a transfer, and it's still blocked." "No, I told you. It's my mother's account, but I had power of attorney. I don't care what she filed. She was sick when she revoked it. She's got memory problems or something." "Memory problems?" I nearly laughed. I hadn't missed a single Jeopardy question in 5 years. The nerve of him, already laying the groundwork for a false incompetence claim. I stepped back and closed my eyes. Let him hang himself a little more. The next morning, I met with the estate attorney I'd used when Kyle passed. His name was Martin, kind eyes, hands like folded linen. He remembered me immediately. I told him everything. Brian's secret real estate listing, the stolen money, the shady insurance change, the forged signature. Martin didn't blink. We'll file a cease and desist to Lori's agency today, and we'll report the forged POA with the county. As for the insurance," he paused, "I'd consider filing a restraining order, even if just to make a paper trail. I don't want to ruin him," I said softly. Martin looked at me hard. "Elaine, your son tried to profit from your death. That sat heavy between us. Like a truth I'd refused to say out loud finally rang its bell." I nodded. "Let's proceed." After the paperwork was signed, I stopped at the florist. Bought myself a bouquet of sunflowers. Sometimes a woman needs a victory symbol, even before the war's done. By the time I got home, I had 8 missed calls and a voicemail that made my blood run cold. "You've made a big mistake, Mom," Brian said. His voice wasn't frantic anymore. It was flat. Dangerous. "You want to cut me off? Fine. But don't come crawling back when the taxes hit or the bills pile up. You don't know how to manage all this. You never did." "Oh, but I did." He just never stuck around long enough to watch me do it. I played the voicemail again. Then once more. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I needed to hear it. Really hear it. The man on the phone wasn't my baby boy with freckles and jelly-stained fingers. He wasn't even the teenager who used to sneak out the basement window and return smelling like cheap cologne and bad decisions. This man? He was a predator, and I was his prey, until now. That evening, Trina came over with lasagna. We ate in the sunroom. She didn't press me for details, just sat there while I quietly recited the list of things I'd done that week: trusts, title changes, legal filings, account freezes, beneficiary revocations. When I finished, she let out a low whistle. "Damn, Elaine," she said, slicing another piece. "You didn't just clap back, you called the whole damn orchestra." I laughed. First real one in a while. "Think it's enough?" "Oh, honey," she said, "you haven't even started." That night, I slept like a stone, because for the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was playing offense. I thought I'd taken back control, until I uncovered the final betrayal. My name was never even on his house. By the time the weekend rolled around, I'd already completed my checklist: accounts locked, property secured, life insurance cleaned up and redirected. I even had the police report drafted, tucked neatly into my side table drawer like a fire extinguisher, just in case. But there was still one thing I hadn't done. I hadn't looked into Brian's house. When his startup failed, and he came sobbing to me about the shame of losing his home, I didn't hesitate. I wrote the check for his down payment, covered closing costs, even paid off the first few months of his inflated mortgage until he, quote, on his feet. At the time, he said, "Don't worry, Ma. I'll put your name on the title too. That way, it's our insurance. Security if anything ever goes south." I hadn't thought about it since, but that morning, sitting in my breakfast nook, with the sun pouring in through the blinds, I decided it was time to double-check, just in case. I called the county property assessor's office, gave the address, and waited. When the clerk came back on the line, her voice was warm, but hesitant. "Ma'am, the house is under the names of Brian T. Hollis and Lori K. Hollis. No other owners are listed." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Are you sure?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "I'm looking at it now," she said gently. It was filed in 2020. No co-owners or lien holders except the mortgage lender. I thanked her and hung up slowly. 3 years. 3 years of thinking I had partial ownership in the very home I helped him buy. 3 years of believing, somewhere in the back of my mind, that if everything else fell apart, I'd at least have that house to lean on. Turns out, Brian never even thought twice. He'd lied to me. Again. And this time, not out of panic or pressure. This was cold. Calculated. Filed away at the clerk's office, hidden under layers of polite words and forged promises. I stared out the window at the birds flitting around my feeder. My throat was dry, but not from tears. No, I wasn't gonna cry anymore. I was done mourning the son I used to know. Because that boy was long gone, and in his place stood a man who thought his mother was just a bag of money with a heartbeat. That afternoon, I marched into my garage and pulled out the fireproof box Kyle insisted we keep. Inside were the original bank wires to Brian's escrow account, copies of the down payment, my handwritten budget notes in the margins, scraps of sacrifice from the year I canceled every vacation just to help him buy that damn house. And now? Now I had evidence. I took it straight to Martin, my attorney. He whistled low under his breath. He really never added you to the title? Nope. He tapped the documents, thoughtful. We can't reclaim the house, but if you want to sue for fraud and restitution, you've got a case, especially if we can prove he promised to list you as co-owner. I nodded. We're not there yet, I said, but have the paperwork ready. Because I knew Brian. He wasn't done, and neither was I. That evening, the final domino fell. It was Lori this time. Her number popped up on my screen around 7 p.m. I almost ignored it. But some part of me wanted to hear her squirm. I answered with a calm, "Hello?" Her voice was tight, controlled. "Elaine, we need to talk." I sipped my tea. "About?" "You froze the accounts. You revoked the POA. You're creating a lot of problems, okay? I'm securing my future, something your husband should have done himself." There was a pause, then a bitter laugh. "You know, Brian told me he offered to bring you into our home, to help you, that you turned it down." "I turned it down because your idea of help was pushing me into a corner and waiting for me to die." Silence. Then her tone sharpened. "Look, this isn't good for anyone. Our mortgage bounced today. Brian can't make payments without the joint funds. If you keep going like this, we'll lose the house." I smiled faintly, the kind of smile you give when you've already walked away from the fire and someone's just noticing the smoke. "Lori," I said, my voice cool and even, "I don't care if you lose the house. I've already lost something far more precious." She bristled. "You're being vindictive." "No, dear," I said. "I'm being awake." She hung up on me. And I sat back in my chair, the weight in my chest finally beginning to lift. Because I hadn't just protected what was mine. I'd pulled the last blindfold off. Now it was their turn to see in the dark. Brian strutted into the bank like a prince. 10 minutes later, he walked out, pale, sweating, and humiliated. Monday morning came with the cool breath of fall on my porch swing. I had my robe on, my coffee steaming in its usual spot, and Trina's mutt Rusty asleep at my feet. She was out of town for a funeral and asked me to dog sit. That little beagle was better company than most people these days. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was an automated alert from the bank. Withdrawal attempt denied. $8,000 flagged from frozen account ending in 3,421. I blinked. $8,000? The boy had some nerve. Not only was he still trying to dip his hands in a frozen account, he was doing it in broad daylight like he owned the place. Well, I wasn't surprised, but I was curious. So I drove down to the bank. And what do I see through those glass doors, right as I park? Brian, standing at the teller counter, shoulders stiff, face flushed like he just ran a mile uphill in wool. Lori was next to him, talking fast and waving her phone, trying to pull up something. Probably fake proof of access. The teller, bless her, held her ground. I stepped inside just in time to hear Brian say, "I had power of attorney. She's confused. Can't you override it?" And the teller, patient as a schoolteacher, replied, "Sir, your mother revoked the document through proper legal channels. This account is frozen pending fraud review." He looked ready to explode. I cleared my throat. His eyes snapped toward me. You ever watch a man age 10 years in a single second? That was Brian. His confidence crumbled. His mouth opened, closed. He looked at Lori like she could rescue him. She couldn't. "Mom," he said, voice dry. "What are you doing here?" I held up my phone. "Got a withdrawal alert. Thought I'd see what the emergency was." He started to speak, but I raised my hand. Calm, steady. To the teller, I said, "You can verify this account is under investigation for forged documents and unauthorized use. I'm the sole legal owner." "Yes, ma'am," she said without hesitation. Brian turned red. "You're making a scene," he hissed. "No," I said. "You made the scene when you tried to sell my house. This is just the intermission." He glanced at Lori again, but her mask was starting to slip. I saw it in her eyes. Panic. Calculation. The dawning realization that the free ride was over. "Let's talk outside," he said through clenched teeth. "No," I replied. "Let's not." Then I turned to the manager and handed him the letter from Martin, my lawyer's notice of account seizure and pending fraud complaint. "I believe this completes the paper trail," I said with a smile. The manager nodded. "We'll file it today." Brian's mouth opened like he wanted to protest, but Lori tugged his arm. "Let's go, Brian," she snapped. "This is embarrassing." And that was it. They left like two kids caught stealing from the church donation box. Heads low, footsteps quick. I watched them walk out. Didn't say a word. Just stood there, heart thumping slow and sure in my chest. Later that day, I called Martin again. Told him to proceed with the final filings. If Brian wanted access to anything else of mine, he'd need a lawyer. And a miracle. After the bank blocked his withdrawal, Brian's panic set in. He just didn't know I'd been ready for this breakdown all along. It didn't take long. By Tuesday morning, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Missed calls from Brian, from Lori, even from some unknown number I could only assume was one of those fake financial advisors they'd started seeing when they thought they were rich. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because every hour they didn't have access to my money was another hour they spiraled deeper into reality. At 4:17 p.m., a text finally came through from Brian. "Mortgage payment bounced. Lori's threatening to move out. Can we talk, please?" That word, please, was a new flavor coming out of his mouth. Sour and just a little too late. I didn't reply. Instead, I poured myself a glass of sweet tea and took a long, slow sip on the porch. Rusty curled up at my ankles, snoring in the shade. Sometimes silence is the best sermon. Later that evening, just after the sun dipped low enough to cast shadows across the flower beds, I saw a familiar car slow roll past my house. Brian's. He didn't stop, just kept driving but slower than normal, like he was checking to see if my lights were on. They were. A message, clear as a bell. "I'm here, and I'm not afraid." The next day, he finally cracked. I was in the laundry room folding towels when the knock came. Hard, fast, anxious. I didn't rush. By the time I opened the door, Brian was already pacing on the porch, his phone in one hand, a sheaf of papers in the other. He looked like he hadn't slept. Hair a mess, shirt untucked. There was even a mustard stain on his collar. "Mom," he said, voice desperate, "you've got to stop this." "Stop what?" He blinked. "You're ruining my life." I raised one eyebrow. "I thought I already did that by raising you." That shut him up for a second. Then he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Lori's gone. Took half the furniture and moved in with her sister. Said she's not built for instability, whatever the hell that means." I didn't flinch. Sounds like the only thing she was built for was spending other people's money. "She said you created this chaos." "No, Brian, I cleaned it up." He stepped closer. "Okay, look, I know I screwed up, all right. I get it. But you cutting me off like this? You freezing everything? That's war." "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "War was when you tried to sell my house behind my back." He swallowed hard. "You've got no idea how bad things are right now," he said. "I'm weeks behind on bills. I don't even know if I'll make the next car payment. That joint account was the only thing keeping us afloat." I stared at him, arms folded, and finally I asked, "How long, Brian?" He frowned. "What? How long have you been using my money behind my back? Before the trip? Before Lori even moved in with you? When did you decide my savings were your backup plan?" He looked away, and in that silence I got my answer. I nodded, then turned to go back inside. "Wait," he called. I can fix this. I'll pay it back. Just give me some time." I paused, turned halfway. "Time? Brian, you already cashed in every second I gave you, every loan, every favor, every grace. You burned it." He took a shaky breath. "I'm your son." "No, I said. "You're a grown man who made his bed. Now go lie in it." And I closed the door. Gently. Not with rage. Not with a slam. Just quiet. Final peace. The kind that comes when you stop trying to save someone who never wanted saving. Only access. I didn't cry that night. Didn't even feel sad. I'd done everything a mother could do. And now? Now it was time he learned what it felt like to stand on his own, with nothing under him but the lies he built. Brian barged into my home like he still had power. But this time, I was the one holding the letter that would end it all. It was Thursday when the storm finally came. Not the kind with thunder and wind. No, this one wore cologne and a wrinkled shirt, and it slammed its way through my front door at 6:30 without knocking. I was in the den, folding Afghans, when I heard the door crash open and Brian's voice echo down the hall. "Mom, we need to talk. Now." Rusty jumped up and barked once, then ran behind the recliner like even he knew something ugly was coming. I walked out slow. Brian stood in the entryway, face flushed, chest heaving. He looked like a man who'd just realized the water was deeper than he thought, and he didn't know how to swim. "I've had enough," he said, holding up a stack of paperwork. "You froze every account. You ruined my mortgage. And now the fraud reports flagged my name? Are you trying to destroy me?" I didn't raise my voice. Didn't even blink. Instead, I pulled open the drawer of the entry table and handed him a letter. He looked at it, confused, tore it open, and then read again. It was a copy of the formal revocation of power of attorney, signed, sealed, notarized, plus a summary of the fraud investigation I'd filed with the insurance company. And finally, a letter from my attorney, a sentence I'd underlined twice with red pen. "Our client is under no legal obligation to support or house Mr. Hollis." Brian's eyes scanned the page. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then he crumpled the paper in his hand and threw it on the floor. "You're cutting me off," he spat, "after everything I've done for you." I laughed. A single bitter note. "What have you done for me, Brian? Name one thing." "I gave you a place to retire. I invited you into our home. You tried to sell mine. You forged documents. You changed insurance policies. You looked me in the face and smiled while planning your escape route with my money." His fists clenched. "It wasn't like that. I was protecting our future." "No," I said. "You were financing yours." The fury started to melt from his face, not into remorse, but into fear. He paced a few steps, then stopped. "Do you know what this does to me? Lori's gone. I have nothing now. Then maybe it's time you learned what it's like to earn something." He stared at me, something dark in his eyes. "You'd really let your own son go under? Just let me fall?" I didn't flinch. "You didn't trip, Brian. You jumped." There was silence. He opened his mouth, closed it. Then, quietly, barely above a whisper, he said, "Dad would have wanted you to help me." That stung, but only for a second. I straightened my spine. "Your father," I said, voice low, "would have wanted you to grow up." He flinched, and I walked back into the den. "Leave the key on the counter when you go," I said over my shoulder. Brian didn't move right away. He stood there like he might cry, or scream, or punch the wall. But in the end, he just left. The front door clicked shut behind him. Not slammed, not kicked, just shut. And for the first time in a long time, the silence in my house felt like peace, not absence. I walked to the table, picked up the crumpled letter, and smoothed it out with calm hands. Then I lit a candle, poured myself a glass of wine, and watched the sky darken through the kitchen window. My son may have walked out of my house for good, but for once, I didn't feel like I was the one left behind. Brian tried one last guilt trip, dragged my late husband's name into it. But I didn't flinch. I told him the truth. He'd be ashamed of you. The next morning I woke to a quiet that felt earned, the kind that settles into the walls after a storm. I made pancakes, real ones, with buttermilk and a touch of vanilla, the way Kyle used to like them. I even set a second plate across from me, not because I expected anyone, but because I needed the ritual. Halfway through my first bite, my phone buzzed. Another message from Brian. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have raised my voice. Can we please meet?" Just talk. One more time. I didn't answer right away. I chewed slow. Let the syrup settle on my tongue. Thought about how many years I'd spent jumping to answer his every call. His every whim. That morning, I decided he could wait. 3 hours later, he showed up anyway. This time, he knocked. A small mercy. I opened the door. He looked different. Not broken exactly. But not angry, either. Just smaller. A boy trying to find the pieces of a man he never really became. "Thank you for opening the door," he said. I just nodded. He held out a folder. "What's this?" I asked. "My apologies," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "You brought your guilt in a manila envelope?" He gave a weak laugh. "It's proof I closed the side account. The one I opened with your name on it." I took the folder. Flipped it open. There it was. Bank statements. Closure forms. A typed letter from the branch manager. All dated. All signed. "You really expect this to fix it?" I asked. "No," he said. Quiet now. But I didn't want to walk away, still hiding something. That earned him a second look. For a moment, we stood there. Two people with the same last name, and almost nothing left between us. Then he said it. "Do you think Dad would have hated me?" My breath caught. "No," I said slowly. "He wouldn't have hated you." Relief flickered across his face. Then I added, "But he would have been ashamed." The flicker died. "Your father worked 3 jobs to keep this house. He fixed that furnace himself during a snowstorm because we couldn't afford a contractor. He sold his fishing boat to pay for your braces. And you," I choked back the rising wave in my throat, "you forged my signature to cash in on my death." He looked like I'd slapped him. "Good. Let it sting." I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? Steal? Lie? Abandon me at an airport? His shoulders slumped. I was desperate. "No, Brian. Desperate is what your father and I were when you were 6, and we had $42 between us. Desperate is selling your wedding ring to pay for a child's medicine. Desperate doesn't look like a grown man with a leased car and a $6,000 espresso machine." He looked down. Couldn't meet my eyes. "I thought you'd always be there," he whispered. I shook my head. "I was. And you walked over me like a doormat for 15 years. We stood in silence. Then, soft and final, I said, "I'll always love the boy you were. But the man you are? I don't know him, and I don't owe him a damn thing." He turned to go. Hand on the doorknob. He paused. "Is this really goodbye?" "No," I said. "It's finally goodbye." And I closed the door before he could say another word. Behind it, I leaned against the wood, heart pounding. Not from sadness, but from the kind of clarity that only comes when the fog lifts after years of being used. He would try again. Maybe. A few more texts. A birthday card in 6 months. Some performance of regret. But I was done auditioning for his approval. This was my house. My life. And I was the one calling the curtain. Brian thought I was broke without him. But I paid off my house decades ago. And now? Every penny sits in an account with only my name. The days after our final conversation passed, quiet. Too quiet, maybe. But peaceful. I kept waiting for that old ache to return. The one that used to twist in my ribs after every argument, every betrayal, every time I told myself maybe next time he'll mean it. But it never came. I sat in my garden each morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunlight hit the tips of the lavender. Rusty chased squirrels like it was his job. And inside, the house felt warmer, lighter, like it had finally shaken off the weight of being Brian's backup plan. One afternoon, I decided to walk through every room of my home, room by room, touching each doorway, each light switch, each photo frame. The guest bedroom where Kyle once slept when his chemo kept him up. The sewing room I turned into a nursery when Brian was born. The attic with the boxes labeled in my own handwriting. Christmas 1987. Brian's baby clothes. Mom's quilts. Every inch of this place whispered, "You built this." And that truth hit me so hard, I had to sit down. I'd spent the last 2 years believing I needed Brian to help manage my affairs. That I was getting too old to handle the paperwork, too forgetful to juggle taxes, insurance, the upkeep. That I'd become some fragile, gray-haired version of a woman who used to be steel. But here I was, house paid off, every utility on auto-pay, groceries stocked, garden blooming, and not a single thing needed him. I pulled out my ledger that evening, the same one I started when I married Kyle. A thick navy book with gold trim, filled cover to cover with records. On the final page I wrote, "Current status, mortgage, paid in full, since 1997. Property taxes, up to date, paid through December. Savings, transferred to private trust. Pension, active. Emergency fund, $21,782. Brian's access, 0.00%. Then I underlined that last one. Twice. A few days later, I got a call from Martin, my attorney. "You'll be happy to know," he said, "that the fraud review on the joint account has officially closed in your favor. No restitution needed. And Lori's agency formally removed your home from their listings." I smiled. "So Brian can't list my house again, even by accident?" Martin chuckled. "Not unless he wants to visit a courtroom." "Perfect," I said. Then I asked him to walk me through the final piece of the puzzle. "I want to revise my will." "Of course," he said, professional as always. "Still planning to exclude your son?" "Yes," I said. "Every cent." We updated everything. Brian's name, removed. Charitable donation to the hospice that cared for Kyle? Doubled. And the biggest change? I added Trina. That woman had driven me to appointments, brought me tea on bad days, shoveled my walkway without ever asking for thanks. She never once made me feel like a burden. She just showed up. Over and over. So now? She'd inherit the house, along with every last penny of the trust if anything happened to me. I signed the papers that afternoon, then walked out of that office feeling taller than I had in years. At home, I stood in the kitchen, poured myself a glass of lemonade, and looked around. This was mine, all of it. Not because someone gave it to me, but because I had worked, sacrificed, survived. And now? I had the power to choose who would benefit from all that labor. Blood didn't guarantee loyalty, but love? That could still grow in unexpected places. And I was finally learning to plant my seeds where they'd be tended, not stolen. Brian thought the worst had passed, until the police knocked, asking questions about forgery, fraud, and a little real estate stunt he never saw coming. It was a Tuesday when it happened. I'd just come back from the farmer's market, my car smelling like basil and ripe peaches, when I saw the cruiser parked outside Brian's place. Not just a patrol car. An unmarked sedan, too. Those government-issue ones with plain black rims and men in tucked shirts who don't smile much. I didn't linger. Just drove past. Sunglasses on, heart hammering even though I'd done nothing wrong. It wasn't until I got home and flipped through my messages that I found out for sure. A voicemail from Martin. "Elaine, just a heads up. Local law enforcement reached out. The insurance company filed a formal report. They're opening an investigation into the forged beneficiary forms and unauthorized POA use. I advised them you'd be fully cooperative if needed. You did everything right." Everything right. Didn't feel like it. Felt like my gut was on fire. Still, I made myself a sandwich, fed Rusty, watered the peonies. There's a kind of defiance in carrying on, like telling the universe, "You don't get to shake me anymore." It wasn't until 3 days later that the fallout hit. Brian showed up again. Only this time, he didn't come stomping. He knocked. 3 soft raps. When I opened the door, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was wild. Shirt wrinkled. There was a sheen of sweat across his forehead, and a tremble in his jaw he couldn't quite hide. "I need to talk," he said. I let him in, mostly because I wanted to look him in the eye when I said what I'd been rehearsing for weeks. He sat on the couch, hands clasped tight like a child at confession. "They came to the house," he said. 2 detectives, said they had questions about the insurance, the listing." I nodded, calm. "I told them it was all a misunderstanding," he added. "That you'd given me access. You forged my name, Brian." He blinked. They're saying it's a felony, he whispered. It is. Silence. He looked up at me, and for a brief, flickering second, I saw it again. That little boy who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms and whisper, "Make it stop, Mommy." But I couldn't make this storm stop, because he had caused it. And now, it was finally raining on him. "I don't know what to do," he said. "You cooperate, you tell the truth. They could charge me." I nodded. "Yes, they could. And you're okay with that?" His voice cracked. "Your son being dragged through court like a criminal?" I took a deep breath and told him what I knew he never expected to hear. "I didn't make you a criminal, Brian. You did that all by yourself." He stared at me, blinking hard. And then, in a voice I'd never heard from him, quiet, hollow, scared, he asked, "Is there anything left? Any part of you that still loves me?" I looked at him for a long, long time. And finally, I said, "Yes." His head snapped up. "I love the part of you that once held my hand with chubby fingers. The part that made me a paper crown on Mother's Day. The boy who cried when I skinned my knee and said, 'I'll get a Band-Aid, Mama.'" His lip trembled. "But the man sitting in front of me?" I said softly. "I don't know him. And I sure as hell don't trust him." Tears welled in his eyes then. But I didn't move. Didn't reach for him. Didn't try to fix it. He stood after a moment, wiped his face, and walked to the door. Didn't ask for money. Didn't offer an apology. Just paused, one hand on the knob. "Am I going to jail?" "I don't know," I said. And it was the truth. After he left, I sank into the recliner and let the quiet settle over me. For once, the burden wasn't mine to carry. I'd already carried enough. With Brian under investigation, peace finally returned to my home. And in that silence, I made the final choice. Not one penny to him. The garden bloomed brighter that summer than it had in years. Maybe it was the compost. Maybe it was Rusty keeping the squirrels in check. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the absence of lies, stress, and that constant ache of being taken for granted. I moved slower these days, sure, but I moved lighter, easier. Brian hadn't reached out again since that last visit. I read in the paper, small print, back page, that the DA's office was reviewing his case for possible charges. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, but it was there. Insurance fraud, financial elder abuse, quiet words, heavy meanings. I didn't celebrate, but I did sleep better. One evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked through the house barefoot, the hardwood cool under my soles. The air smelled of honeysuckle drifting in through the screen door, and I thought, this peace? It was worth every hard choice. That weekend, I invited Trina over. She showed up in flip-flops and brought her famous deviled eggs. We sat in the sunroom, laughing about the old high school principal who used to threaten detention for chewing gum. After a while, I reached under the table and pulled out a small folder. She looked at it, puzzled. "What's this?" "My updated will." Her smile faded. "Elaine." "No, now hush and let me speak." She sat back. "I'm not dying. Not planning to anytime soon," I said. "But when the day comes, I want no confusion. No battles. No snakes slithering out of corners with fake tears and greedy hands." I slid the folder across the table. "You get the house," I said. She blinked. "Me? You were there when he wasn't. You shoveled my sidewalk. Brought me cake when I was too sad to eat. You never once asked me for money. Never made me feel like a burden." Tears welled in her eyes. "Elaine, I didn't help you for this. I helped you because, well, you're my friend." I nodded. "Exactly. And you're the kind of person who'd take care of this house, not flip it for granite countertops and a wet bar." We both laughed at that. Then I added, "The rest goes to the hospice that cared for Kyle. They deserve it." "And Brian?" I looked out the window. The sun was setting behind the willow tree. "Brian made his bed," I said. "Now he can lie in it." Trina reached across the table, squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," she said. "I finally did," I replied. Later, after she left, I stood in the doorway, watching the fireflies blink in the dark. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Brian. Not at myself. I'd made mistakes, sure. Loved too hard. Forgave too much. Waited too long. But in the end, I'd reclaimed every inch of my life. And now? Now I was passing it on to someone who truly valued it. Brian once called me a burden. But now? He stood in front of an ATM, frozen account blinking back at him. Access denied. I didn't plan on seeing him again. Not at the grocery store. Not in court. Not anywhere. But life's funny like that. Sometimes it brings you full circle, whether you're ready or not. It was late fall, one of those crisp mornings when the leaves skitter across the pavement like they've got secrets of their own. I'd just come from the post office, sent off my yearly donation to the Veterans Pantry, and decided to treat myself to a cinnamon bun from Grady's Deli. As I turned into the parking lot, I saw a figure at the ATM. Thin. Slumped. Familiar. Brian. He didn't see me. Not right away. He was standing there, punching buttons harder than necessary. Then he pulled out his card. Tried again. The screen blinked. He leaned in closer. I didn't need to guess what it said. Access denied. I stood by my car, groceries in hand, and just watched. He cursed. Looked around. Like maybe someone would explain it to him. Then he tried another card. Same result. His shoulders sank. He turned, about to walk off. And that's when he saw me. For a second, we both froze. Two people who once shared everything. Birthdays. Illnesses. Nighttime lullabies. And now? Only silence. He didn't walk toward me. Just stood there. I gave him a small nod. Polite. Final. He opened his mouth. Closed it. And then he looked away. I got in my car and drove home. Didn't cry. Didn't even feel shaken. Just resolved. The house welcomed me like it always did. Faint smell of lavender. Rusty's tail thumping against the wall. I fed him, kicked off my shoes, and sat down at the kitchen table with my bun and a steaming cup of coffee. Outside, the leaves danced in the wind. I opened my notebook, the navy ledger I'd updated so carefully, and wrote 2 words on the last page. The end. And then, beneath that, I wrote, "Family isn't who drains you. It's who fills your cup." That afternoon, I sat in the sunroom and finalized the last few estate documents. Neat. Clean. No loopholes. No ambiguity. Trina's name written in clear, unshakable ink. And a letter enclosed, just for her. Take care of this house, won't you? Let it be a place where people feel safe, where no one gets used up or tossed aside, where love doesn't come with a price tag. When it was done, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. Because here's the truth, the one they don't print on brochures or carve into gravestones. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. I don't know where Brian ended up after that. Maybe he figured things out. Maybe he didn't. But either way, I stopped carrying him and started living for me. Thank you for walking through Elaine's story. Sometimes revenge doesn't come in raised voices, but in reclaiming peace and planting roots where they'll grow.